Roll call now, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But it does have a school kind of attendance feel, though.
Everybody pass. Right. So welcome to this joint meeting of the Mercer Island City Council and the Mercer Island School Board for April 7th, 2016. We have a number of items of business, and Ralph and I are doing this together for the first time. We're going to sort of casually ping pong back and forth in terms of who's running the show. So Ralph, you want to launch things right now?
Let's see. Just appreciate everybody here together, and appreciate also the synergies that the school district and the city continually kind of support each other. And I guess what's teed up first? We got bond projects. So Gary, would you like to?
Sure. I would just like to say to the council that our bond projects are running on schedule, and they are in budget. We're so fortunate to have two very, very good general contractors and a number of subcontractors that they've hired to keep the project moving. There are different stages of development, because it was just a year ago last month that we broke ground for Northwood Elementary. If you remember, City Council was out and the children came from the boardroom and walked along the sidewalk. So it's not that many. It's just a little over a year that we are as far as we are. So I'd like to invite Brady Fox, our owner's representative, to come and share our progress to date.
So, good evening, and thank you for inviting me to share our projects with you again. I think it was October was the last time I was looking back at the last presentation, and we've really come a very long way. I see a few new faces around the table, and so I thought I would kind of go back and give you a very quick overview of both projects, and then we'll talk about progress. I do want to say, since we have all of the right people around the table, how much we appreciate our partnership with the city. And although our city partners in this project have certainly been regulators, they are also a great member of the team and have been just absolutely fantastic to work with. So thank you for that. So first project, didn't bring a picture of it, but the high school is nearly complete. Work-wise, we're complete. We're just doing the last little bits of closeout, and we'll be finaled within probably a couple of months. Islander Middle School, just to remind you, is a 93,000 square foot new construction. It is the first of two construction projects that will be down there. When the second project comes, I don't know, but we're replacing 8 general purpose classrooms, 2 science, 2 special ed, and 2 shared learning areas. We're replacing the 3 music classrooms and putting 6 practice classrooms into the new space. We're also replacing the common spaces, and I think we've talked a little bit about how the growth enrollment at the middle school has really taxed those common spaces. So locker rooms and gym space and library and fitness rooms and locker rooms have been a challenge. So those spaces are also getting replaced. This picture is the view standing at the new Loop Drive, so the 300 building would be off to your right. And from a site plan perspective, this is a little bit odd because north is actually to your right and east is to the bottom. So the existing 100 and 200 building will remain. The 300 building will remain at the completion of this. And right now in that pretty green courtyard that you see between the new building and the 300 building sits the commons and the music spaces. We have abatement to do in those and demolition, which can't obviously happen until school's out. So this project will continue through the summer, and then likely we'll be doing site work on that big detention pond in August and September, and probably planting as well. You can see here the outline of our new building. We have most of our roof down, all of the structures up, and it's an interesting building because at one end we have classrooms that are finished and ready for casework and whiteboards, ceiling grid in, all of our mechanical, electrical roughed in. And then at the other end of the building, we're still pouring concrete slabs. Those slabs are all polished concrete, so we don't have the usual challenges of having to dry out a slab before we put a finish down on it. So just a couple of fun pictures for you. This is the classroom wing looking at the north elevation of it. All of our windows are in, the building's wrapped. Our brick veneer on the lower level is all on. And this week we've actually gotten all the furring strips up to start putting the metal panels in place. Inside the building, you can see ceiling grids in, mechanical, electrical are roughed in. We're painted and ready for whiteboards and carpet. All of these classrooms have radiant floor heating, along with the shared area, which is really a nice feature. Probably one of the biggest changes people are going to see and feel is just how differently the building is oriented on the site. This is a view looking at the covered area outside the Commons, and the Commons is a full glass wall that looks out onto the track and field, so there's going to be a very different relationship between the common spaces and the track and field than existed before. Remember, that was just a big blank wall of the gym. This is a view looking into the Commons. It's a little hard to tell from here, but that's our big grand stairway that comes down from the second level and opens up into that Commons. And it's an interesting space because it varies in height. You come in at one level and then you step down about 3 feet into a sunken area where all the lunchroom tables are and there's terrace seating, and then you step down another couple of feet to the gym level. So I think visually it'll be very interesting and provides lots of kind of unique and interesting places for kids to be. Overall, we're probably about 60% complete. As I said, we're starting finishes in the classrooms, drywall's underway in music. We're roughing in mechanical and electrical in the gym spaces, and pouring concrete. So it's exciting. As Gary mentioned, we're on schedule and within budget, and the project's going very well. Next project, Northwood, which everybody sees because we all drive 40th and 86th, is ahead of the schedule that we have for the middle school. Our original intent was that both would be completed this summer and occupied in September, and we're well within that. I think we're going to be able to finish this building within the next couple of months, and we're pretty far along. So this is the view off of 86th. Again, just to remind you of the things that are in this is a 77,000 square foot elementary school. And there are a couple of things that contribute to that size that are kind of unique to this building. One is that we have a separate full-size high school / middle school gymnasium, which is very unique for an elementary school. None of our other 3 elementary schools have that. It means that lunch tables can stay set up, and it isn't this mad scramble to try and time PE with lunch, and that it's also a great community facility. We have 20 general purpose classrooms. In addition, we have special ed, an art room, a technology room, and a music classroom. We also have a space for the 2 developmental preschool classrooms that we currently house at Peak. Those will be moving into the new building. We have 8 shared learning areas, and those are also very unique to this design. I think shared learning happens in all of our schools, but it oftentimes happens in the hallway, and here there's a very purposely designed space for that to occur. And then we have the standard library, kitchen commons, admin. We also, I'll show you on the site plan here. So in this site plan, north is up, so that's 40th along the top and 86th that runs along the left-hand side. Our primary visitor staff parking is off of 86th, and then there's a large loop drop-off lane with some pull-out space on 86th to facilitate the queuing of cars there. And then on the east side of the building, off to the right, you'll see a big bus loop, and that is a dedicated bus loop drive during the school day. And then the little parking lot that you see there to the right is the high school parking lot. So we'll have some ADA stalls there, but I think all but one or two of those stalls are assigned to the high school during a typical school day. After school, all of that parking becomes available, and both the bus loop and the drop-off lane off of 86th have been designed so that we can fully park and still have accessible fire lanes. We did the same thing at the middle school and the high school, and it's been very successful. Really facilitates a good drop-off situation in the morning and then allows a bunch of event parking to happen after hours. So in this photo, what you see to the north is the rain garden, and I think many of you saw that massive stormwater infiltration facility that we installed under that rain garden. Hard to believe that we did that. You look at the pictures and you look at it on site, and I still can't believe it's underneath there. And then our play area is to the south, and big field off to the southeast. Progress within the building. You can see here we have our solar panels installed. So there are 342 of these solar panels. I think it's 99.9 kilowatt hours, which puts us one solar panel away from being a public utility in PSE's eyes. So that's why it looks like there's more room, but we can't put any more up there. You'll also notice that there's a green roof. We have about 8,000 square feet of green roof that was installed in the last month. And you can see off to the right where the new asphalt is, that's a service yard and the pad that we've put in the event that portables are needed at some point in the future. And then the big play field off to the right of that picture. Inside the building, I thought I would bring you some pictures of things you'll never see driving down 40th. So this is the internal courtyard of the building, and it's a pretty unique design. It's a lot of planters and seating and patios, so each of the 4 kindergarten rooms open up onto this courtyard, and they each have a small outdoor area that belongs to the classrooms. And then we also have a big pad where we have the preschool, the developmental preschool play toy. So the intent is that this internal courtyard is a smaller scaled space for the very young kids to be able to play and not have to go out onto the big playground if they don't choose to. So that's taking shape. Inside the building, this is our gymnasium. So right now you're standing on the stage looking towards the north. And we just finished the last board of our gym floor today. So the gym floor is completely down. The stage area, which is where we're standing, is actually going to be all reclaimed maple from the old North Mercer floor. So we salvaged all that wood and are reusing it in the new building. Our commons and the whole commons area actually is all polished concrete. So that's all been done and covered and ready to go. And I didn't bring you some inside pictures of the classrooms, but we are painted out with ceiling grid in most rooms and starting floor finishes. So making great progress, about 80% complete, and just continuing the details. A couple of things probably to note would be our frontage work on 40th will start late this week or early next, and we'll be working from our 88th and 40th intersection up north towards the traffic light, west towards the traffic light, and then wrap around on 86th and work our way back towards the admin building. So there'll be a little traffic, but we'll get a good bite on spring break when it's a little bit quieter, and then finish up. So. Any questions? Comments? What's that?
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's coming. Good, thank you.
This looks great. Thank you very much for the update from this. I know the school board's much closer to this, but for the council it's been a while, and so it's exciting to see this progress.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Do you want to cue up the propane?
Sure. So the last time we met, we talked about, actually the last 2 joint meetings, we talked about a joint effort with City Council to have a propane-fueled fleet of school buses that we would be migrating to as we were purchasing buses, and the city had expressed some interest in potentially piloting a program with some of their own vehicles that would change from diesel or typical fuel to a propane fuel. And we discovered that there was a fatal flaw in our plan, and that fatal flaw is really around the size of the tank that would be needed in order to fuel a bus fleet. So not necessarily a small fleet of vehicles, but clearly a bus fleet. So I'll turn the microphone over to Dean, or if Dean could approach the podium, he could then answer any questions, or Dean can elaborate. But we feel that at this point it's time to move away from the idea of propane fuel, but potentially there's an opportunity to look at more environmentally friendly vehicles in the future as technology catches up.
So at that point, we were investigating the installation of a fueling station. That was at the very time the Puget Sound was experiencing various natural gas or propane explosions in different places around the Sound. And we found out very rapidly that we could put a test tank, with maybe 60% of surety, so there's still a large question, of 1,000-gallon capacity. But we would need a total of 5 of those tanks with 5,000 gallons of capacity in order to operate a full bus fleet. So that precluded the development of this particular site. It's just too small, and there's too many community and neighborhood facilities around it, plus there's the main competition football field and the bleachers and kids all over the place, so we rapidly figured out it would not work. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
and maybe I'll just ask, Steve, can you talk just a little bit about the city's situation with respect to propane?
Sure. I think that one of the things that we were hoping to work with the district on is perhaps being able to use our site behind City Hall here, the maintenance facility, because we do currently have a 1,000-gallon propane tank that we use for, we have a few pieces of equipment, some mowers, and I think one of our pickup trucks that use that fuel. And we, in working with the district, discovered that the 1,000-gallon tank that we have is about all we can put there because of the setback requirements and because of not only setbacks from property lines but also from any kind of assembly areas. So we're pretty much going to stick with our 1,000-gallon tank, at least for now as well.
So you're looking at other technologies. I know that Metro recently, the Metro Sound Transit, announced electric buses that they're trying out, and I'm not saying that works for you, but I'm curious whether you looked at those at all?
Yes, we did, and I think the short answer is that they're not within our ability to pay for them, given the early development of them and the cost.
It would more than triple the cost. So, and right now, a large bus costs upward of close to $100,000. So if you triple that, that would be $300,000 per bus. So,
Is our bus fleet currently gas or diesel?
it's called clean diesel, but yeah.
So is there are biodiesels available, and is that something that's sort of been floated as well?
Yeah.
It seems to me Mr. Grady had us on the path to a biodiesel tank at one time, and that eventually sort of fizzled for economic reasons, I think.
Same reason.
Yeah.
Same reason. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, anybody else on propane? Sort of a sad story of an idea, but better to figure it out now rather than to spend a bunch of money on going down that path and then decide it wasn't going to work later on. Next item on the agenda is bus stop arm violations and cameras. I think over to you again, Gary.
So this is a topic that has been explored with city staff for the last, I'd say, 12 to 24 months, so 1 to 2 years. A couple of districts, we waited until the idea was established in a few Puget Sound area school districts, and so that has occurred. And we find that more often than we would hope, cars are violating both the stop arm and the red lights. So we know that there are certain areas of the island where cars will go around the bus even though the stop arm is out and the lights are on. So there is technology for us to work with a company called ATS, American Traffic Solutions, all cameras on buses. It would require a city ordinance that would allow these tickets then to be issued for those violators. And I've spoken to Chief Ed Holmes, who has said in this regard, in this instance, he is supportive of using camera technology to identify those infractions. And the good news is that 80-some% or near 90% of the violators don't repeat. Potentially it's the cost of the ticket or other deterrent that does cause them to not be repeat offenders, but it's a very sizable fine that's established by the state, and so we're working in conjunction with the city, and potentially Commander Jokinen may have any additional information, but we're working with city staff just as early as yesterday or this morning on moving the ordinance for you forward and moving the contract on our side forward. So our board will get an authorization for me to sign a contract with ATS at a future board meeting. But we are moving forward with that. Dean?
Yeah, I'll just expand a little bit on the danger of the situation. School buses are designed to stop in the road and to stop traffic in both ways so that children, when they unload, can cross immediately while the traffic is stopped to the proper side of the street that they need to be on. And that's designed purposefully by law so that children of small ages particularly aren't going to a corner and crossing unsupervised. And traffic is all stopped in all directions. And it used to be we would find a violation 1 or 2 a month. Now we're finding 1 or 2 a day. And each violation is the potential of a tragic accident. And we know that we need to take some kind of action to decrease that kind of behavior. So I would also tell you that Bellevue, Kent, Renton, Highline, Issaquah, all of them are moving in that direction as we speak.
And we know there are 2 districts, one in Pierce and one in King, that have moved in this direction already. So it's already been in place for potentially up to a year. So we know that the system works, and it's been around the country as well. And it's just making its way to our corner of the world.
What does this have? What's the effect on bicyclists? Are they supposed to stop too, and can they be ticketed?
It's a stop sign, so all traffic is supposed to stop for a stop sign.
How do you ticket a bicyclist via camera? I don't think you can.
I would turn that over to potentially Commander Jokinen or anyone that might know about how we issue tickets to bicyclists.
Hi, Dave Jokinen, Operations Commander with Mercer Police. Great question. Very challenging to find out and identify that cyclist, because what they're going off of, what ATS is going off of, is the license plate on the vehicle. Bicycles don't have license plates, so likely they wouldn't be cited. There is a lower, obviously, a cyclist versus a car. Is lesser. Similar would be for motorcycle. If a motorcycle went through, it would be more challenging for us to identify that motorcycle. Luckily, here, oftentimes here on Mercer Island, a lot of times if it's the same people going on the same route at the same time, if I have a situation like that, we can have a patrol car go there and observe that also and identify who that person is. So.
Dean or Commander, could you just talk about how this ATS was the company, how the whole system works, is supposed to work, so that we have that as a starting point, and then we'll come back to questions like yours.
You want to know how the system works, or how we got to this point of using ATS?
Well, I was thinking more just how the system works.
Okay.
What happens.
So ATS will install a camera system onto the bus along with a modem and connection, cellular connection to the system, and basically when the paddles go out, the camera is active, and if somebody goes past the bus, it'll snap a picture of that vehicle, both going through and passing, get 2 images. It goes to ATS. ATS takes a look at the image, make sure that all the the license plates there, it's visible. Then it is sent into a queue where an officer will have to review that image. An officer will review that image. If an officer determines, yes, that vehicle violated the paddle, the officer will then send it off to ATS. A citation will be issued from ATS. It will also be issued to our court system. It will go through our court system, and it will go to that individual. The individual then gets a copy of it. They're able to go online and look and confirm whether or not that was them, that was their car, and the violation occurred. Then they have the right to, just like with any other citation, come to court if they choose to mitigate it or fight the citation or just pay the citation.
Thank you. Debbie?
Going back to the question about bikes, I wish I could remember one person said, well, maybe for bikes you could actually post the pictures on the city website. Okay. Don't know how that goes, but just throwing that out there. I noticed in here that it's tentatively, that the final city council action for the ILA is tentatively scheduled for August 1st. And I fully support the principle of having this in place for the kickoff of school with a proper public education. Is there anything that we need to do or can do to ensure that we get the city's part of this work done in time for school to kick off?
Steve, do you want to, because it's really, I think, on the city side, because we do want to, and as you're thinking about that answer, we do want to work with the city on a public relations or communication campaign so that there is information that's issued jointly by the school district and the city to alert everyone in the community that this is happening. And so people need to be aware that buses will have cameras, that the fine is this, that this is about student safety. So we'll want something in place weeks before the prior opening of school. And I have heard that some school systems and cities have come up with grace periods as well. So for the first...
So we did work on all of those issues this morning at our committee, and ATS attended the meeting, and the commander was there along with our director of transportation. We had a representative from the court system. Is there someone else?
And our city attorney.
And our city attorney. And we too, August was a bit late in order to be able to implement this. The committee was feeling that it would be better off if we could do that sometime in June in order to get the interlocal in place immediately between the school district and the city, immediately following the adoption of the ordinance. We also talked about the first day of school is August 31st, and then there would be a 30-day warning period where anybody that violated that particular ordinance for a period of 30 days would get a warning notice rather than the ticket. And then in October 1st, I think we said, we would implement the actual ticket system.
And Dean, is that a warning period something that ATS recommends, or is that something that would be in the ordinance? Where does the warning period come from?
I think the warning period is something that ATS recommends, and if you've seen other cities and other jurisdictions go live with any type of photo enforcement, program, oftentimes there's glitches and problems, and you don't want to roll out your system and be giving out citations or tickets. I mean, all you have to do is look at 405 and what happened at 405 earlier this year when people were getting bills for tolls that they didn't do. So you want to roll out the system, make sure it's working properly. Part of that system working properly is giving warnings. Once we know the system's working perfectly and working properly, then we give out the tickets.
We also discussed this morning that once the city adopts the ordinance and we sign the interlocal, we would spend the months of July and August having our public relations person, both of our entities, talking about that in the community and having it in the newspaper and getting everybody on board that this is going to be implemented so that they are forewarned before anything starts.
To some extent, I have assumed the council was going to be supportive of this, but this is a chance for council members to ask preliminary questions such that if you have concerns, and because I hear Dave suggesting, why don't we accelerate this, and the talk here is of can't we get the interlocal agreement done sooner. But if the council has concerns or particular things that are going to need to be addressed in this, and now would be a good time to get those out so that the staff within both organizations is prepared to work through that and make this move along at whatever pace it can move along. So, Benson, here.
This topic was actually discussed by the Public Safety Committee last year, and the members of the committee, Councilmember Mike Cyril was on the committee. I mean, I think we were all unanimous about opposing any kind of grace period, and so, and I see Councilmember Grouse was nodding or showing a little chagrin when this idea of a grace period was mentioned. I think, if we can start the process early, start educating the public, letting them know that we're looking at this and it's coming down the road. I think there's a lot of support, certainly for this, and safety is paramount, and I think, frankly, I would be opposed to a grace period. I think we can just start educating the public now that, again, that this is something that we're looking at.
Dan, grab a mic, or you got a microphone already. Dan, then Dave.
Go first.
Dave, then Dan.
I think we're going to say the same thing. What Bruce said is correct. That if we can accelerate our part and that have everything done for you all, so you're not waiting on us at all, it seems to me the best thing that we can do is have it live and active on day one of school. And Commander Joe can make a great point about testing. Sometimes IT goes awry, occasionally. And if we can have that, maybe it's a test period rather than a grace period. I agree with Benson, and we can have that test period built in. But if we can get out of your way by putting all of our stuff to bed, I think that would be a great move by us, unless anybody on the council has wild opposition to saving these criminals.
I have wild support. And I would just ask, so in Seattle, when you hit a red light camera, you get a little bright flash, so you drive through and think, oh. My daughter learned that the hard way, and so I'm wondering if there's some sort of conditioning thing that happens with that too, right? So we can help condition people as well as ticket them.
I don't know if that one flashes, but I know what you're saying.
We can get that.
Can we condition more than a 40-foot-long yellow bus with red flashing lights?
Driver, back.
Can we put a taser on there?
So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Benson that when you put grace periods in when you're trying to change people's behavior. This is now illegal. It's illegal now. It's going to be illegal on September 1st, and it's going to be illegal on October 1st. So you're not trying to change any people's behavior. You're trying to get them to do what they're already supposed to do. And if anything, if you give a 1-month grace period, you basically have said that for 1 month you can break the law. and which is, even though for the last 500 years that's been the law. So that to me, that doesn't make sense. I understand, Commander, your concern about making sure we get the bugs out of the system, but the way that it was described by Gary or Dean was that everything has to be reviewed by a human being before it goes forward. So presumably if that person reviewing it looks at it and sees that obviously there wasn't a car there, or the car wasn't doing what we think it was doing, then, and presumably you also have the bus driver who can confirm one way or another what they saw. I mean, you've got a way of checks and balances here to avoid something happening. But, yeah, I don't think any of us can live with the idea that on September 15th some kid gets killed, and we say, oh, I'm sorry, that was a grace period. It doesn't work that way. You don't get a grace period in this type of business. So I would be strongly against a grace period.
Well, I think it's pretty clear there's council support for this addition of cameras. It's just a question of pace. Yeah.
And just listening to you, I think both of us would agree that we can make that happen in that period of time.
Bruce, one more thing. The thing that I think Wendy mentioned, you got this. I think you've got the signs in Seattle where there's a camera. I don't know why you couldn't put a sign on the back of the bus similar to what you see at the intersections saying this bus is, people passing this bus will be caught on camera.
Or just $750 fine for passing this bus.
You tell people there's a camera, and that becomes the deterrent.
Right, that's a good idea, but we won't have a camera on every bus, and we're going to rotate. So ATS gives us or loans us the cameras. They're fairly expensive, and they're going to then take a portion of the fine. So we will be rotating. I think we're going to get 5 buses of our 30-some buses, and the buses will be rotated on various routes as drivers will report stop arms. And we know which routes there are. We already know there are certain routes on the island where drivers will drive around the bus. So that's the only downside, because then they'll see the buses that don't have the sign and think, oh, this is a bus like the sign and everything. This bus may have a camera.
It's like a fake burglar
So if there's 5 out of 30-some, it's a fairly low percentage.
Yes.
Are we doing that because that's really all we need, or is it a funding issue that we're facing? Because it seems to me that this is more than self-finance. I just want to make sure that there's enough cameras on enough buses to get done what needs to be done.
In transportation in the school district, we feel 5 buses are sufficient. We understand violations decrease very rapidly once you start implementing the system. And so we would be moving those around from time to time in order to take any problem routes and solve those. And it is a very costly system.
My friend in Bethel School District, who has used the system for over a year now, said that when in the initial 6 months, if the number of violations was high, then ATS added more cameras, because it told them on some statistical model that meant that there were more violators happening on the other percentage of buses that didn't have cameras. So they added cameras. So we would see in the first few 6 months how many violators there are, and we potentially would get more cameras if it looks like it's over a certain level that they feel would generate more income, obviously, because they're giving the cameras, because they're actually paying for the cameras through a portion of the fine. The other thing we didn't talk about was that there's a portion of the ticket that comes back to the school district that we would then use for school safety. So school improvements in safety that could result in flaggers or additional people that would help improve the crossing of streets, the loading and unloading of buses, and so on.
I'm just curious as far as ATS and how they get compensated. You mentioned they get a percentage of the ticket, but obviously as tickets, fewer tickets, I mean, are they being paid a flat fee of some sort for their services?
Yes. The ticket itself is set by state law and is $394. Is that my memory? And out of that amount, ATS gets $69, and then the city gets reimbursed for the police costs and the court costs that are involved with that. And usually that range is somewhere around $35 to $45, somewhere in that range.
And correct me if I'm wrong, The other thing, I think, is we might not represent a very large market, but I think this is something that King County school districts worked out. So this is a case maybe where our scale is maybe benefiting from being associated with King County.
That's true. Yeah. Okay, Commander Dean, any more information you need from this body as you go forth and put this together? Yeah, well, yeah, Steve, go ahead.
With regard to the schedule, we'll get together, I think, within the next day or so, internally, and figure out how much we can move that forward. Our council agendas are pretty full for the next several months, but I think the discussion that's been had here will really help us to hit the mark so that when it comes to city council, hopefully it will be an easy discussion.
When will the existence or the length of grace period be determined, since there seems to be particular, I mean, I also agree with Dan and Benson.
I heard it, I think we heard it loud and clear that we didn't like the idea of a grace period, and we would like to implement it with the first day of school, and that any problems could be handled through the officer's review of the event via the camera systems and taken care of in that fashion.
And we may go through a testing period where we may have buses on the roads putting the lights out with vehicles that we've allowed to go through in a safe, controlled area to test the system to be sure that the system is working. I'd rather that we tested that ourselves internally on roads that the police would assist us with.
ATS will actually conduct the testing for us.
Right, but I'm talking about the actual simulation.
Yeah.
So, school board members and city
Okay, thank you very much. I think you want to pull up the next one?
I think we'll have the superintendent talk about the diversity initiative.
Yeah. So I would say first that the board really started the systems level change with diversity almost a year ago. So in August of last year, our school board adopted a fundamental around diversity and equity. And it then helped change and reshape our system. So it meant that one of our core values was around fostering respect and inclusion of all students, and that we would provide individual empowerment and equity and access to programs. So we, as a school system, valued that this is something that we have not explicitly called out in our work. And so the board then started the ball at the systems level with adopting this fundamental around diversity and equity. So backing up, going now in a backwards way, the door can't be closed because we're not in executive session, so the door should be open. Thank you. Thank you, Adair. Yes, so I want to be sure that I don't see everyone around with a laptop, so let me pass, this is a paper copy of our diversity charter, as well as the school's commitment to diversity. And I think we also made about 10 hard copies of the briefing paper in case you don't have your laptop with you. And so backing up then, if you started August of 2015 and the board adopted this goal, it meant that there had to be some pre-work done. The school system was responding to the fact that our community is changing. It is changing demographically. And we noticed those changes over time. And this is an opportunity, or this has become an opportunity for the Mercer Island School District to adapt to a new changing demographic. And what we are finding is that if we looked at ethnicity and race, we found that the number of families that identified as Caucasian dropped about 10%, from about 76% to about 66 or 67%. The number of families that identified as Latino or Hispanic has grown from a 1 to 2% up to as many as 9%. Families that had never had an opportunity to identify as mixed race are now identifying as mixed race in growing numbers, in growing percentages, beginning at about 3% and now at about 9%. So that there's changing demographic in our community, and we're just looking at ethnicity and race. We're not looking at other aspects of diversity. So we felt as a system that the issues that we were hearing from families were dealing with race first. It didn't mean that there weren't issues around disability diversity, or there weren't issues about, it meant that there were not issues, I'll say this in a positive way, there were issues about gender identity equity, or there were issues about gender access, equal access to highly capable programs. In other words, were we identifying more boys than girls in our high-cap programs? Were the instruments that we were using favoring boys who were at age 7 or 8 versus girls? Those are examples of what the system was being challenged by as we looked at our issues around diversity and equity. So in 2014, I decided to form a community committee comprised of parents and community members, who, including the police chief, who helped form a group of individuals that would give me feedback about things that we ought to be doing differently and better. So the briefing paper outlines our journey, and our journey led to a charter that we initially approved on December the 3rd. It's on this handout that shows initially approved in December the 3rd, and then we changed it and we reaffirmed it in March of this past year. Most of the 6 paragraphs remained unchanged with some changes. In fact, if you looked at the second paragraph, what was changed was the phrase around multi-ethnic and or multi-racial. We originally had a word in a parenthesis called mixed, and so that was offensive to at least a member of our team, and so we refined the identification of multi-ethnic and multiracial. So we chartered ourselves as an advisory body, and then shortly after that, we asked every school to have a commitment to diversity. We wanted every principal to have a conversation with staff about their commitment to every child having equal access to the educational programs, and that we would celebrate every child regardless of any of the protected categories that are in state law. Now we've expanded diversity well beyond ethnicity and race into all of those categories. So every school then signed on and said, yes, this is important to me. We're going to work around diversity and equity and inclusion, and we're going to identify some actions. And one of the thoughts I'd share with you is that as educators, everyone comes to education with the best intention to help children. No one ever comes to education to judge and hurt kids in any way. But what we found is that when we asked teachers to provide equity to certain students, which we define as giving something to one child that they need, which may not be the same that we would give to everyone else, there was some resistance. And the resistance was about equality. Well, that's not fair. And we learned in our readings that equality is the enemy of equity, because there's some sense of, in each of us as educators, that we want to be fair. And so we have a lot of work to do around this. And the easiest way to describe the equity concept is, if the goal is to see over a 4-foot fence, and most children are 4 feet and 4 inches tall, they could likely see over the fence. But if a child is 3 feet and 10 inches tall, they can't. So they're going to need a box to step up onto to be able to see over the fence like everyone else. So we are now thinking about, what does equity mean in the educational environment, and how comfortable are we that children may receive a, quote, running start, if you will. And so as we worked down the road, we've had these diversity action teams in place for a year. We wanted a community event, and we thank you. I thank you. The board and the community, rather the district, thanks the city for co-sponsoring Dr. Nagura's presentation just 2 weeks ago. And our teachers are still talking about him. And there is a ripple or tidal wave, depending on whom I'm speaking with at the time, of the changes that he, Dr. Nagura, has inspired or caused them to think differently about. So, as a small island in the middle of the lake, in a huge metropolitan city in the shadows of Bellevue and Seattle, we're a very diverse community, and with lots of diversity of ideas and thought as well. And I hope that we celebrate and embrace those differences and seize on those differences to help us become a stronger and even a better community as we treat each other with the dignity and respect that each of us deserves. So that's sort of a big, broad overview. Thank you again for your support in bringing yourselves and your staff and your friends and parents that you know. And I'm excited to see where this might go. And I would say Chief is not here with us. He's at a meeting potentially. He told me he would be away at a convention or some other event. But this has been close to his heart, that he, as a police chief, be a part of conversations with community around issues of equity and diversity and a recognition that every person has dignity and worth, and we ought to judge people not by, the rest of the phrase. But Ed is a wonderful member and supporter of the work that we're doing on this level. So I'll turn it over to you to ask questions or comments.
I just want to say I think Ed is a champion, and we're not done with the racial discussion. On April 20th, the city is co-sponsoring with the Eastside Race and Leadership Coalition an art demonstration at City Hall where folks can reflect on racial equity and social justice and write on a little piece of fabric and decorate an arch. So Cindy Goodwin has been pulling that together and is just doing a phenomenal job. We had to postpone it because of spring break because sometimes calendars are hard to align. And then I learned today that the Chamber of Commerce and the King County Library System are partnering to promote 3 talks about racial justice and equity and topics for that for people to come and listen and think about. And I don't have the flyer, but somebody somewhere should, and I think we can get it at City Hall and in our library and community center.
That flyer was passed out, I believe. Your wife was, Dan, was one of the people passing out those flyers, which is great, about the talks coming up at some of the not to call you out, but call her out.
So take a village,
yeah. So those are great, and I'm sure we can find those on the website. But I also just wanted to add, Gary was talking about the changing demographics, but I think this need was there before the demographics were changing, and I just want to acknowledge that it's not just about the changes that are here now, but we've always had some diversity in our community, and we've always had a need for promoting acceptance and celebration of diversity, as well as providing equitable opportunities. So I'm really glad to see that we have this going on now. Also, I wanted to mention at the PTA council meeting yesterday, I think both of you had left by then, but the MIPA, the Preschool Association president, announced that their group is adding a position for diversity outreach as well, which I thought was a great, that they're following the lead of the schools as well, so in that area.
Debbie?
I actually have a lot more to say than I probably will say. Because I want to commend the school district because I think you are ahead of the curve, particularly in comparison to the city, in terms of the efforts that you've made, and I think it's a call to action for this council and for our city staff as well, to look at some of the practices that you've instituted, some of the learnings that you've gained, and for us to be looking to our own organization and what it is that we can be doing there. I don't know if the rest of my fellow council members have had the chance to look at some of the demographics. The research that you did, it was fascinating. It was particularly fascinating to me when you look at some of the demographics of the kindergartners relative to the 12th graders, or it's like K and 1, and 11 and 12, and you can just see how different it is in that span, but all within our school district. To me, it's also, I think, very important for us, just given, as we say, that there's some of the traditional attributes of diversity, which can be race, it can be religion, et cetera, but I think what we've seen, at least in the political environment, is there's a tremendous amount of diversity in political opinion and perspective on so many things that are in front of us. And I would also like us to think about, as we go forward in our city manager search, that we ensure that we have somebody who's well aware and capable and excited to bring that diversity of opinion forward and celebrate it, and that perhaps jointly we even look at some of the tools and opportunities we have with some of the 21st century technologies to encourage not just the schools community, but all islanders to bring their opinions forward and that they can be heard and understood. So this close with tremendous kudos, and I hope that we as a council can reflect a lot of that great work in the next couple of years in what we do.
Anyone else?
It's always difficult to follow Deputy Mayor Borland because of her eloquence. But I just have to say that I really appreciate the school district and Dr. Plano for your leadership in this area. It does show, I think, that this community is a progressive one, and people sometimes want to think highly of themselves, and yet there's always a problem in the community sometimes, and I think bringing this issue up and having people talk about it, and again, diversity means certainly more than just race. I mean, there's a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of other things that separate people, but I think it's so important to make sure that this community is one that welcomes all peoples, and I think having this kind of policy out there so that people know that this is something that's important to the district, to the school board. And again, as Deputy Mayor said, I think this is something that we need to make sure that people realize it's important to the city government also thinks it's very important. And so, again, I commend you. And I certainly think we all have great, I think Michael mentioned that the chief is a champion. He is really something special when it comes to this. He and I have had discussions about issues of racial profiling. Not that it necessarily occurs on the island, but just the whole idea. And he's very concerned about that and wants to make sure that this community is one that's welcoming. So again, I think that reflects highly in our as well.
Anyone else? All right. I think we're then on to dedication of Northwood Elementary.
Yeah, so the board is hearing about this date for the first time as well. When Brandy and I, Dean, put our heads together and thought about the readiness of the building to accept visitors and where we are in terms of progress, we picked a date that works actually best for us. It's Saturday, June the 18th. And we would love for you as a city council to make time on your calendar and join us for a ribbon cutting. And we're going to invite everyone. The entire community will be invited to come and look at the school for the first time. So if that doesn't work, and board members, this is your opportunity to tell us, because we then came up with a plan B of the 20th through the 24th, but those are school days, and we would need to work around those times. But we thought Saturday, if we did it early in the day, would give people time to come to a morning event and celebrate and then be off with their weekend. So we hope that you've been terrific partners with us. You and your staff have been great partners in this whole process. So I can't speak for the board. I'm speaking as their employee, as their school superintendent, that I think you are important folks to join our board and be there.
Yeah, I would completely agree and echo that. So, and then also, if we go with the 18th, do you think we'll have the opportunity to have some other scheduled kind of open houses for people in the community that could
Yes.
get in?
Yes, we will. In fact, we do plan to bring students to the school who are going to be transferring to Northwood so they can have a field trip and go and see their new school and their new classrooms. So yes, there will be other opportunities. The school will, I'm looking over at Brandy because she's beginning, I think, to bite her nails down. But we will have, like we did at the high school, certain times and certain periods where the building will be open for people to come and walk through and see this new and amazing facility. I think it will cause you to lose your breath for a moment as you see these new spaces. They're quite impressive.
So are you asking folks to check calendars now?
And board members.
I was thinking board members first.
Yeah, board members, yes, sounds good. 18th rather. Sounds good.
Seattle Marathon for me.
I'm in Florida this week.
So what I got was what time of day, it's the Seattle Marathon and something over here, and I got all three of those coming at me at once.
I would say it would be early in the day, so I'm thinking a 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Morning event.
11, sorry.
I'm out of town that day, but
Okay.
So something in the morning that would allow people, after the ceremony of cutting ribbon and having students and celebration, balloons and all that, we could get on with our weekend. So probably in a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock time frame.
Great. All right. Seems like got most school board members.
actually, I will be in Seattle Marathon.
Yeah. What time does the race start, Dave?
Whenever I show up.
When does it end?
Which day?
Well, regardless, I think we'll hopefully get a big community turnout. I think it's kind of wonderful that that school is being built right by so much traffic going by Gallagher, and I think we've heard from a lot of people in the community the excitement about that school, because it is kind of front and center for a lot of Islanders, so that's neat. Gary, do you want to talk about the 75th anniversary?
Would you like to offer a few thoughts? Go ahead.
That's about 75th anniversary?
Sure, go ahead, yes.
No, I'm going to hand this to you.
All right, so September 1st, 1941, the school district was incorporated as King County number 400. And so we are celebrating our 75th year as an agency. And when we reached 70, we invited all of our board members, living board members, of course, who were invited, bless you, to come to a board meeting, and many came. And the oldest board member who showed up was a board member who opened North Mercer Junior High, John Davis of Davis Wright Tremaine, one of the founders of Davis Wright Tremaine. So Mr. Davis came to the board meeting with his hat, and he shared a story about purchasing the land, that land from the Seattle School District. So he said, I signed the contract in 1959 or 60, bought the land, and of course in those days the state of Washington, through timber sales, funded the building of schools. So we do have a scrapbook of when North Mercer opened. It was the superintendent of public instruction in Olympia who came and dedicated the school in those days. Now we get maybe 3% or 4% of the funds from Olympia, so we're not planning to invite Superintendent Doran. In any event, did you had a couple of ideas?
Yeah, I think you just had your staff redo the letterhead with a new emblem, or in addition to the emblem, the existing emblem. And I think we're open to new ideas to kind of celebrate the 75th anniversary. There was an idea also that this might be an opportunity to recognize the CMIPS people since 1990 that have kind of stepped up and supported the bonds, the levies over the years. And also like recognizing PTAs and also the former school directors. So if anybody else has any ideas over the next few months, just please share them with us. Yeah.
And our new Pathfinder Awards are sort of connected with the 75th anniversary of starting something new, recognizing these, this is a milestone, so I hope that if you are free the morning of April the 26th, you can join us, and 4 former Mercer Island graduates will be honored. They come from the classes of 1964 or 5, I believe, and 1980, 86, and 87. And so these are 4 amazing graduates that will inspire us. 2 will be 1 live video link up from Tufts University, 1 on video who happens to be showing up next week, but will be in Tibet, and the other 2 are, 1 is flying in from California, and the other is local here in Seattle. So you'll get to hear all 4 of them express their appreciation for having grown up in this community and having attended Mercer Island High School.
Sounds great. We are at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Dave? Ask a quick question, since we have the school board in the room, that as we're about to get to the conversation about town center and the Joint Commission is sort of boiling up their cauldron of things, do you as a group think at all about 1, that process, or 2, the number of new residents that that zoning may create in the city in terms of your capacity and ability to do it, especially given the huge investment that you've just made? And if you wanted to sort of weigh in with a group or individual opinion on that, this might be a time.
Thank you, Dave. As a group, we have not discussed this, so all I can give you is my personal opinion, and I do worry about this a great deal, personally. I would like to initiate some kind of long-term planning concept, and it's clear, at least to me, I think, that the numbers of people that are living in Mercer Island are going to increase with the institution of a train station that goes directly to UW, and increase with children, because that's why one reason they would move here. So, yes, I worry about it a lot. I am not sure what the solution is, but I wouldn't mind engaging in the city council to throw around ideas, engaging with the city council at some point.
Yeah. Dean, as the microphone was coming around, I think was assuming it was going to you as the as the one who, of course, did an awful lot of work around demographics at one time. I don't know whether you wanted to weigh in here or not.
Well, during the election, that was one of the things I was paying attention to, because I know I wasn't on the board yet, but there was this transition from using mitigation fees to impact fees, and so that was discussed, I believe, by the board and the city, to change the structure of how we collected payments from new construction in order to help fund some of the impact that these new students would have. So if anybody wants to follow up with that, you probably know more about it than I do, but... All right, that was your question.
Yeah, at this point, it's been approved and it's in place, but we haven't really collected any fees under that because the town center has been, what do you call it, in a moratorium. And so there hasn't really been any construction approved or fees.
I guess maybe the easy thing, Steve, you have a pretty good grip on the schedule of the whole conversation that's going to happen with the council coming up. Maybe you could just summarize that so that the school board and public are aware of it.
Sure. The schedule that both the Joint Commission is working on, and also that I think the staff and City Council are working toward, is that the Joint Commission would, and this is the Joint Commission of the Planning Commission and Design Commission, who are working on putting the proposal for council consideration together. And it's anticipated that they will deliver their recommendations to the council on May 2nd. That's the date we have scheduled so far. They still have work to do, and they're working very hard, but that's our schedule. And then council would look at that on the 2nd, and there'll be additional meetings as well. And depending on what the council decides in terms of their time needs, there could be additional meetings scheduled as well. So that will all be coming to them in May.
I was just going to add that when the district has looked at demographics around the island, and we've looked at numbers of students that have been coming from the town center, we're finding that most of our growth is not coming from the town center. There is growth coming from the town center. More students are coming than had arrived, than were there, say, 5 years ago. But one would expect the growth, one looks at all of that construction and assumes that the growth is coming from there. However, in October, this past October, as part of our diversity work, we had a district-level event to welcome new families. And so the Diversity Advisory Committee all assembled, and we invited all new families to this event. In looking at getting their addresses and sending letters out, including using multiple languages, because we looked at the family of first language at home, and Chinese was a large number of them, so we had the invitation translated into Chinese. We found that in October, there were 300 new families to Mercer Island. And most of the families are coming from the bulk of the island, not just the town center. So it's the homes that are turning over, particularly mid-island, is where lots of families are moving to and sending children to schools. And then when I looked at the demographic of the nearly 300, about 125 did not identify as Caucasian, which was even a bigger number than when you just look at cutting the demographics as a whole. So it means that lots of new families are moving in with lots of ethnic and racial diversity. So just to your point, but we would be interested in working with you or knowing about projections, how many units are being approved or in the pipeline, how many students may be generated from those, because it helps us with where our present boundaries are, because they're going to be their brand new boundaries, and the school that we will have some capacity in is Northwood. So that we did assume that there would be additional growth, and that school has the ability to handle more students than when it opens in the fall of 16.
And just to echo some of that, I think demographics are huge to us. Small island, very small school district, and we've traditionally had a lot of variability in our enrollment to maybe a peak of 5,200 kids, 5,600 kids in 77, and a low of maybe 3,600 in the late 80s.
3,100,
yeah.
10 years later.
And now we're at about, 4,400? And a lot of things change. The economy is going to definitely impact things in terms of how mobile people are. We have a very diverse age group on the island. A lot of the people who moved here in the 60s and 70s have chosen to stay here and have a high affinity for the island. I guess the question will be, will our generation still have that same affinity? Or so a lot of challenges, but the more data, the better the data, I think the better decisions we'll be able to make. And I think those demographic projections, I think what I've been told is they're pretty accurate for the first 5 years, but after that, it's pretty difficult. So, Dan?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, if individual school board members or the district want to make any kind of input into this, I would encourage you to do it to the Joint Commission and not do it to the council. I mean, the council, speaking just for myself, I don't think the council should be in a position of taking new information that hasn't been shared previously with the Joint Commission. That sort of defeats the whole purpose of the process. And so there are no more public meetings for the Joint Commission, but they do accept emails, and the emails are distributed to the entire Joint Commission at every one of their meetings. The next meeting is this coming Wednesday. So Dave or anyone else who has individual comments, I would encourage you to please direct them to the Joint Commission. Second, I think it is very important, as Gary already said and as Dean has told us many times before, not to get people excited about, oh my God, the town center is going to generate all this demand for school space, because that's not what the data shows. But some people hear that and they just go crazy. And so I would encourage all of us to deal with the information that we've actually been provided by the school district, and it's been very clear all along as to where the extra demand is coming from. And finally, hopefully, Dean, you're starting to get some of the impact fees off of the single family. That should start, that money should be coming in at this point. But you're right, because of the moratorium, it's pretty dead in terms of new impact fees, but hopefully on the single family, you're starting to see the benefit of that.
Anyone else? Steve? If I could just offer a clarification, the Joint Commission is not actually meeting this coming Wednesday. Their next meeting will be on the 20th. Pardon me? They're taking a week off. Yeah.
Don't let it happen again.
Anyone else? All right, with that, I think you'll be into recess and we'll be adjourned, if I'm not mistaken. So we're adjourned.
All right. Thank you.